Hey guys, what's going on? It's the Stick Figure Historian. We're jumping back into the story of Texas here today. So, let's get cracking. Last week we talked about the Anahuac disturbance of 1835, where Travis came to the rescue of a couple tariff protesters that got thrown in the slammer. And that, among other things, triggered the New Mexican dictator, Santa Anna, to send his brother-in-law, General Martin Perfecto de Cause, to Texas to keep the peace there. Whilst Martin Perfecto de Cause was sailing with his men to the port of Capano, the peace he was sent to keep continued to crumble away. It all began in the town of Gonzales, with the cruelty of a single Mexican soldier. This guy struck a citizen of the town and hurt him quite badly. It would be one thing if this was just a single incident, because, people do things like that to each other all the time. But as I told you before, the relationship between the Mexican soldiers and the Texans had been quite bad since Santa Anna came into office. So, you see, it made one little thing seem like a rather big thing to the men of Gonzales. The dark looks that they gave the soldiers there alarmed the Mexican commanders. They began to fear that the uprising at Anahuac earlier in the year may be repeated here. There was a cannon in this town of Gonzales, a beautiful bronze 6-pounder for keeping any Indian attacks at bay. The Mexican commanders thought of this cannon as they watched the angry faces of the Texans in the town. What if the Texans decided to use the cannon on them instead of Indians? It must be taken away, they decided. It's here that our old acquaintance, Domingo Ugartechea, comes into our story again. His defeat at Fort Velasco 3 years ago hadn't ruined his military career. Actually, now he was the head of all the Mexican military in Texas. Thus, it was he who sent 6 soldiers to Gonzales to confiscate the cannon. And when I say confiscate, I don't mean like he ripped it away from them or knocked them over the head first or anything like that. For, as we have seen, Domingo was a rational guy, and he commanded his men to act with courtesy to the townspeople. Nonetheless, the men of Gonzales were afraid at the visit of these 6 men in blue uniforms. They hadn't dissolved their militia like Santa Anna had told them to. Perhaps the cannon was being taken from them so that the Mexican army could easily come and wipe out all their fighting men. The Gonzales men refused to let the soldiers take their gun, sending them empty-handed back to their commander. Domingo sighed. He didn't want to use force. Perhaps if he sent a bigger band of soldiers, the Texans would listen to him. If not, well, if he must attack the town, he must. 100 men marched for Gonzales this time, with Lieutenant Francisco Castañeda as their leader. Of course, Domingo wasn't the only one who had heard about the failure to collect the cannon. The alcalde of Gonzales, which an alcalde is sort of a Mexican mayor of a town, had sent word of the trouble to other towns in Texas, as well as to Stephen Austin. Stephen warned the alcalde to be careful. Do not attack the Mexicans if you can help it, We're more likely to get help from America if they attack us first. And so, on the 29th of September, 1835, Castañeda halted his men on the banks of the Guadalupe River. Gonzales lay waiting quietly for him, just on the other side. The only issue was, there weren't any boats to cross. The Texans had taken all of them away to their side of the river. Someone came out from the town and shouted across the swirling waters to Castañeda. "The alcalde's out of town. You'll have to wait to speak with him until he returns." Well, if Castañeda was to wait for the alcalde to return, he would be waiting for a very long time. Because the alcalde wasn't really gone after all. This was just a story that the Gonzales men had made up to get Castañeda to stay away. Stalling him would allow them to gather reinforcements. Of course, Castañeda had no way to know that he was being told a lie. He simply respected the townsmen's wishes and drew back to wait. While the Mexican soldiers slept, Texan militiamen from nearby towns came trickling into Gonzales. Together, they lowered the cannon into a hole and shoveled dirt over the shining bronze. Even if the Mexicans did force their way into the town, they weren't going to have that cannon. A full day passed, and no sign of the alcalde. Castañeda shouted to the Gonzales men across the river again. He insisted he must come and fulfill his duty, whether the alcalde was there or not. This time, the Texans told him that they wanted to talk to Domingo first. "We want to know for sure that these are his orders, and we want to ask him why he must take our cannon," they claimed. Castañeda didn't quite believe their lie this time. He began to realize that they were playing some kind of game with him. He did send a letter to Domingo, but in it he told the commander that he suspected the Texans were gathering a force to fight against him. Men often gather together to arm and fight when they are afraid of something. Domingo knew this, and he wanted to prove to the men of Gonzales that they really had nothing to fear. There was a man with Domingo, a doctor, that had long been a respected citizen of that town. So Domingo sent him to calm the Texans down. Surely they would hearken to one of their own, he thought. The doctor arrived in Gonzales on October 1st with his message. The town leader smiled and nodded as the doctor spoke to them, as if they understood everything perfectly. Okay guys, he gets it. You can stop pretending to be bobbleheads now." They agreed to speak to Castañeda the next morning, and sent the doctor away to the Mexican camp to tell him so. Now, it is true that the men of Gonzales planned to meet with Castañeda in the morning, but whether in peace or with weapons, they had not yet decided. As soon as the doctor left, a secret meeting was held. A council of war. The conclusion? They still didn't trust the Mexicans, and nothing was going to make them give up that cannon. There was little sleep in Gonzales that night. The shovels were got out again, and earth began to fly. If they were going to have a battle, they might as well use the cannon rather than let it rot in the ground. John Henry Moore was elected as captain of all the gathered volunteers. Then, all stood and listened as W.P. Smith, a Methodist minister, preached a sermon to bless the coming battle. It wasn't a very biblical sermon. Mostly a rousing speech comparing them with the patriots of the American Revolution. As the Texans stood spellbound by the preacher, a lone figure slipped out of their circle and into the night. An Indian spy. He reported to Castañeda everything that was going on in Gonzales. Needless to say, the news was alarming to the commander. He needed to act now. He needed to act 2 days ago. But the river still stood in his way. No matter, he would find a place to cross. His men followed him as he marched along the waterway in search of a ford. They looked a full 7 miles along the banks, and at last lay down to rest. They would start again in the morning.